Hi, and welcome to the online staff room. My name's Angelina, and I'm an English, EAL, and English language teacher. And on my left,
Hi, I'm Brendan. I'm an English and Italian teacher.
And hi, I'm Mihi. I'm a maths and science teacher.
so thanks for listening and tuning in to this first sort of episode, I suppose. And we're going to be talking about the comparative unit that's coming up, or that is currently now in term 3. I'm gonna start again. All right, so today we're talking about the comparative unit, which is coming up or is now in term 3 of year 11 and year 12 EAL as well as English. Though we may be from different experiences, different faculties, we're really just having a professional discussion in terms of what that looks like as best practice teaching. So, Brendan, how are you starting your comparative? Actually, before that, Mihi, did you have any questions that you'd like to ask about what this is, I suppose?
Well, I don't really have much idea about what the comparative unit is, besides the fact that there's comparison of some sort.
Yeah.
And it's
Very
happening
accurate.
in year 11 and 12. So it'll be a learning experience for me as well. So
Yeah,
hopefully
cool.
I'll get to ask a lot of questions and learn.
Yeah, so at a very
Introduction to the
basic
text.
level, you're looking at characters, plot, and themes. And then if you're analysing it deeper, you'll look at ideas as well, any historical relevance that they might have. So,
So the way that the author's personal context, the time in which they're writing the text, influences the ideas that they insert into it as well.
yeah, so the year 11, so my year 11 class this term, I'm teaching Stolen and the Sapphires, which both have that Australian sort of historical context as well as Stolen Generation. So there's that point of similarity. And then we're looking at how it's different. We're looking at how they're being portrayed differently, or what happens to the characters that lead them to portray their own lives differently.
Yeah, great.
So yeah, I'm actually really excited to teach it because the play is really short. It's a little bit confusing in terms of the narrative structure, but it's really short. I think it's very accessible. And then the other one's a film. So I can see that my students, I showed them the film at the end of last term. So I could see that they were really engaged with it as well.
Great.
And that they were, when we were reading through the play, just the first few pages, and they were really, it was really interesting because I could see them being confused by it because the characters sort of, have you read Stolen?
I haven't read Stolen. I've seen Sapphires, but I haven't read Stolen.
Yeah, so Stolen, the characters switch back and forth between their child versions of themselves and adult versions, but there's no there's no necessarily clear cut in between these transitions or these back and forth. So they actually have to look at the language that the characters are speaking in to determine whether they're now adults, whether they're now kids.
Right.
So that's difficult for EAL students for obvious reasons. But I think that's why they were actually challenged by it, because they
Yeah.
wanted to know what's happening. So I'm actually really excited to teach that this term, because I think it'll be really accessible for myself and for the students. Yes.
Nice.
Just out of curiosity, Brendan, how do you start your comparative unit?
I do a little bit differently at year 11 and year 12.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So for year 11, we're doing the play Macbeth and the film On the Waterfront. So what I do for year 11 is I tend to, because Macbeth, Shakespearean language, a lot of the students really struggle just to understand the language of it. So I actually dedicate the first 3-4 weeks to going slowly through the play, unpacking the ideas, the characters, and then we watch the film text, analyze that a bit, and then start working on the
So
comparisons
you
back and
start
forth.
with Macbeth.
I start with
first.
Macbeth.
Yeah.
And give quite a detailed chunk of the unit to that one. Whereas for year 12, we do The Crucible, which is a play, and Year of Wonders, which is a novel, because just linguistically they're more accessible texts. They're not 400-year-old English as the means of communication, so they're much more accessible. I actually just do a 1-week immersion in each text, looking at the context, looking at the author, overview of the plot and characters,
Yeah.
and then jumping straight into moving back and forth between the texts, mainly grouping it around themes. So for example, week 1 I'll do The Crucible, week 2 Year of Wonders, and then week 3 straight away comparing the role of women across the two texts.
So do you do it by themes, you said? and then
for most of the rest of the unit, and
Yeah.
then through that, simultaneously building up the ideas, understanding of the text, and the comparative writing skills.
yeah, so everything you frame it by theme, but then you bring like characters, and
Absolutely,
writing,
yeah.
and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Within that.
So trying to push some of the students away from having like a character focused essay where they're just
Yeah.
talking about what happens in the text, rather than focusing on what the
Yeah,
author's
that's
trying
good,
to do,
yeah.
what ideas they're trying to create.
Because I suppose that's the difference with text response, which is just your like one essay from one text, to comparative is that with text response you can either get a character question or a theme question. So kids may be in that rut of like just
Yeah.
looking at character and not moving away from that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's
So
really
that's how I'm sort of approaching it. For you, what have you kind of done?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I normally start with characters. But now that you've said that, that sounds like a much better idea.
But the characters is really good because a lot of students do need that
Yeah.
basis to
Yeah.
ground their rest of their understanding on.
Yeah, because I find, and I suppose it depends on text. I find that if the texts are really too difficult or challenging for the students, when I start by theme, the characters and the plot are still, they don't know it yet, or they don't know enough of it yet to make that really clear, detailed answer about themes and bringing all that stuff in, because that's really quite complex. And I think that's why I tend to start with characters and plot, and then I move into themes. Which is sort of like, so you're going themes, characters, and plot, which
Yeah.
is really cool.
Trying to do the
and I quite like
interwoven
that.
approach.
Yeah, whereas I'm sort of looking at characters, but almost simultaneously.
As in between the two texts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll do like maybe one week or 1.5 weeks on just knowing the basis of the text. So we've watched the film, for example. We've watched the Sapphires. We've read once very quickly Stolen.
Did you read that through in class?
Yeah, it's
cool.
quite short. I don't have it's on my bookshelf, but
Yeah.
So we'll read it or watch it the text once just together,
Yep.
and then I would recommend them as homework during the weekend, or it depends on where I'm setting this homework.
Yeah.
For this time, it was during the holidays. So for the holiday homework, they had to rewatch the Sapphires again and read Stolen for the second time. So that means by the time we come back to class, it would be a third reading or like a third analysis of the text. So that's why when we come back, I would get them to let's look at the two plots, and let's work out what's similar in the beginning, or what complications are similar, what solutions are similar, what historical context is similar.
Nice.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's sort of interwoven, like similar to what you're doing, but starting from plot, then going into characters again, and to compare maybe the two protagonists from the text and the Venn diagram, and then writing like a comparative paragraph based off that. So still that interwoven comparative skill, but sort of just differently to what you do, which is, it's quite cool actually.
But
Yeah.
there's a lot of merit to how you're doing it, because particularly for students who haven't necessarily read the text thoroughly before the unit starts, my approach is challenging, definitely. So trying to ensure that I'm catering to that wide range with kids who first haven't got the plot yet, and those who are quite familiar with the characters, the events, and those kind of things.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, because I usually in the first first week of introducing the unit or the text, I will give the students the summary of the text, so that everyone sort of starts from that same basis. So even the kids who don't like reading will be able to engage with it on a bit more of a deeper level than just random comments, I suppose. But I think that with English, because the skill there is analysing and interpreting, I don't think giving the summary of a text to a student is harmful in any way.
No.
Is that what do you think? Are you a bit more on the controversial side, or?
I'm a bit hesitant sometimes to do it.
Yeah.
Because of the challenge of getting students to read the text in the first place often.
Yeah.
So I'm sometimes reluctant to give too much summary or quote banks to the students, with the sort of concern that they might become too reliant on those ones rather than going directly to the text itself. Of course, they have access to the internet. They have access to all sorts of different summaries of the text. They can find the information themselves as well. It does depend a bit. Some students I will target.
Depends on your class.
Depends on the class.
Cool. Yeah.
Some students I will specifically target.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's in term 3. I've been with them for a semester already. I've got a good sense of who is going to go in already struggling to understand the text.
So you sort of know, like, you won't always give a summary, but gauge rather by class or by student, that sort of stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm just curious, were you good at, like, was English one of your, like, did you like English as a subject in school, or did you...
I should probably explain, I didn't go to high school in Australia.
Oh, okay, cool, yeah.
But when I did study English, I didn't really see the purpose of, like, doing comparative and doing, you know, like, reading text. And, you know, I read, like, Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
Compared to, I think, as an adult, being able to see how the skills you learn in like year 12 English is applicable in, like, working life. So it's interesting to now see that as a teacher and think about my own mindset as a student when I was back in high school.
Yeah, definitely.
I had a couple of questions that I was thinking about as you were both explaining your styles of... I'm finding there's a lot of, like, new information. And I'm struggling to organize it in my mind.
Yeah.
So 2 things I was thinking about is the similarities and differences between the way you've structured your the first, you know, little bit of your course.
Yeah.
So Angela, you were talking about the lens of looking at the 2 texts comparatively through characters.
Yeah.
And Brandon, you were talking about looking at it through themes, and within that lens, using that lens to then look at the characters and the plot, as I understand. I guess that what I was thinking about is, say we've come to week 3 of that, you know, doing this comparative unit. What are the students producing at that early stage in your classes? Are they? I heard Venn diagrams. I heard sort of little paragraphs.
Yeah.
So that was my first question. So what does that look like for a student? And then how do you, like, in terms of formative assessment, how do you look at that and think about, you know, is this student, how do you project that forwards, and what's how do you respond to students who are, you know, above level or even below level? What do you do?
Well, I think with, like, just starting from the Venn diagrams and the comparative paragraphs, for what it looks like for a student, if you have students that don't know the characters or the text well, that Venn diagram will be looking really blank. Like, there won't be much in it. There'll just be a few ideas and a few points of similarity, and that's it. Whereas you find that your higher level students will be able to fill that plus extra things along the side. So using a Venn diagram is, I think, really interesting because it can be individual. It could also be pair. It could be a group work. You could make you could actually use it as a really in-depth sort of, even just a classroom assessment to look at knowledge and what they understand about the text. So,
I've actually set that as my pre-reading task. So over the holidays, when they come in, they've got to hand in 4 just small Venn diagrams, just to prompt them to come up with some original comparisons. So I think one of them is about similarities and differences between the plots, the characters. I think it was role of women, and values and belief, because they're both texts really focus on religion in their communities as well. So that way, when I'm starting the unit, straight away getting a sense of
what they know
about the text in terms of just have they read it and understood it, but also their current capacity to identify similarities and differences. And then from there, moving on to sort of comparative paragraphs, and then as the unit progresses more towards lengthier responses, they've got time to get feedback on their current understanding and approach before they have to do more complex tasks, and hopefully they can differentiate a little bit.
What do they produce at the end of this?
A comparative essay. So
Okay.
there's like a set structure and style to what a comparative essay looks like. So from the beginning, you would want to... So the Venn diagram is to look at their comparative ideas.
Yes.
And then the comparative paragraphs is to practice that comparative style of writing. Because there is like a few... I think there's like three main... maybe four main structures of a comparative essay. And different teachers in different schools will teach what structure they think is most suitable. I think Brenda might be similar. So we do this sort of... Is it called integrated?
Yeah.
The integrated structure, which is basically you're addressing both the text in one body paragraph. And your body paragraph is like this long. And I've had students writing like an A4 page that is one paragraph, which is crazy.
It's often,
but it's really good, yeah.
Often the one paragraph then in that approach will focus on
One
a
idea.
connection between the text. So it could be, from my pairing for year 12, both communities are led by a religious male authority figure.
Yeah.
And then, so that would be the connection. Then I'd look at how it's represented in the Crucible, how that's represented in Year of Wonders, and then through those different examples, comparing and contrasting the way the authors have done it.
Yeah.
The other option, so that's because it is quite a dense and sophisticated approach. I usually offer my students the option between doing that one and the block approach. So it's more where you deal with, here's what goes on in text A, here's what goes on with text B, making some sort of links similar to text A, similar to text B.
So it's like
And
one
then-
text per paragraph as opposed to integration, because I feel like the students who are really weak writers, that integrated method, like both text and one body paragraph, will be really difficult because they won't have the language or literacy ability to be able to actually produce that. So rather than limit their writing capability, you want to expand it and still get them to show their ideas, even if it's a different way or a different form.
Yeah.
So I think this kind of answers the question I'm about to ask. So in this final assessment task,
Yeah.
The students are being assessed on the content of their writing, so their
Yes.
ability to
Yeah.
compare the
Yeah.
the ideas, but also their actual construction of sentences as well.
Yeah.
Are those the two main elements?
Yes,
Yeah,
I would
so-
say so. And then it's that the rubric, I think, from VCARS is like broken down into what the writing should look like or what the ideas should look like.
From memory, it mainly focuses around understanding of the text, comparisons between the text, structure of their response, and then their expression, their grammar and word choices.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is.
It's really
It's trying to achieve
a lot.
a lot of things, and it's also quite a significant task because it's a huge portion of Unit 4, but it's also in the end of year exam, a third of the end of
So
year
it's
exam.
60% of Unit 4, and then it's like Section B
Yeah.
for English exam. In EAL, it's worth 60% of Unit 4, but it's not actually in the exam.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
Because you guys have instead the listening exam.
Yeah, so Section A is listening, Section B is text response, and Section C is your language analysis. So, but that's and this is what I discuss with my students and, with you guys as well, that even though it's like a set comparative essay or comparative writing, you're really looking at the comparative skill. Because we compare every day. And one activity I did with my class was I drew a Venn diagram on the board and I said, Korean food, Chinese food. And I said, okay, now in pairs, go away and compare these two foods. And they were like really excited. They were just like brainstorming all this stuff. And I'll say, okay, now let's come back and, let's write on the board what these comparisons were like, what's similar, what's different. So some kids said kimchi for Korean food. And I think some students said like fried rice for Chinese food. And then in the middle there was like rice, just because both cuisines have rice. And I think dumplings was a point of similarity as well. And so the reason why I use that as a start to the lesson or introduction to the comparative unit is because I want to emphasize that this is not just about reading a text and producing an essay. It's really fine-tuning your skills of comparison through these texts. So after we did that for Korean and Chinese food, I rubbed those titles off the board and I wrote stolen and sapphires. I said, now how would we? I said, now how do you compare this? Why are you able to fill the entire Venn diagram for Chinese and Korean food, but not for sapphires and stolen? And we had a really interesting discussion about this as a class, and we came to the consensus that it's because they didn't know at that point, which was end of term 2, they didn't know enough about the text to do a very comprehensive Venn diagram of the two texts. But they eat Chinese food or they eat Korean food maybe once a week or something, and they know what it looks like and what it tastes like. Some kids said it was like Korean food was spicy. Yeah, and I was like, oh, but Northern Chinese food is spicy, and then they just looked at me blankly, and I was like, all right, moving on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I sort of look at that and I think about like with the Korean food, Chinese food example you gave. Sounds like they're putting like types of dishes into where it is, and so like in my mind, I'm thinking about like in math class, we compare different types of quadratic equations, for example, and one of the hardest things for students is to come up with the criteria for comparison.
Oh, yes.
So you know how like they were just inherently or like implicitly doing types of dishes, but that's not the only criteria.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And so when you have this text, for example, or like in my experience with quadratic equations, it's not as easy for students to identify like what are the things we can use to compare them. So if you imagine like your two texts on a table, you got your two texts here. What are the headings on the columns?
Yeah, so that's when you would do Venn diagrams. Like it could be based off characters.
Yeah.
So you could do like instead of Korean or Chinese food, you could do character names from one from each text.
Yep.
As like a more specific criteria of comparison. I
But
suppose.
do the students develop those things? Because I'm thinking
No,
about
it usually comes from teacher.
It's generally teacher generated initially, but more towards the end of the unit, really encouraging them to come with their own thing. So I try to remove that scaffolding and support as the unit goes on. So at the beginning, it's quite structured. Okay, we're going to look at these two characters in these two passages, and that's what you're going to be focusing on and really supporting that initial development of the skill.
That's true, yeah.
Whereas at the end, what I often do, one of my colleagues is actually, she's gone through the text and she's picked just passages from each text that have got complementary ideas or characters, and not telling the students what the criteria are, what they compare,
and get them to annotate.
And then it's like, okay, in these two scenes here, what comparisons can you make? What similarities are the differences? And then, like you're saying with the quadratics, getting them to come up with their own definitions, their own criteria
for comparison
instead.
Right.
But that's once they have a sense of, some of the options that are out there.
And sorry, did you want to add something?
No, that's fine. I had a second question, but I think you go first.
And I remember just from when we were sharing that, one of my really bright students, I think 1 or 2 years ago, had these, instead of doing Venn diagrams, she was doing columns, which works as well. It's the same, different shape, Anyway, so, and it was interesting because when I looked at her thinking and her working, she had like colored arrows going to different ideas. So she had like text 1 on this side, text 2 on this side, and then she just had, this was just her own notes, and then she had like different colored arrows or links and things that were going in between the two. And I thought that was really interesting because I could really clearly see what she was thinking, but that must be how she would be interpreting the text and connecting the ideas as well. So I thought that was really cool, and I said, oh, do you mind if I show the class? No, that's okay. So I was like, hey guys, so you should look at this. And it was, really interesting because I recommended that as a way of going into the text or even doing passage analysis. And the kids found it really accessible for them to unpack ideas because they could color code maybe by theme or by character or by historical relevance or something like that.
Interesting. I guess what I'm taking away is like different structures or visual structures you can use to organize ideas and how to facilitate students to, by doing that structure, that you actually, what you're doing is you're organizing their knowledge.
Yes, yeah.
As always does happen.
Yeah, and so just to sort of close our comparative unit piece for today, were there any other questions that you...
Oh, I've got heaps, but...
okay. No, for another time?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So I think what we're getting out of this is you may teach your comparative unit in a different way, but the skills that we're practicing are the same essentially. So I'll start with the plot, characters, and then themes, but interweaving the writing skill, the comparative thinking skill, all those ideas together within plot, character, themes, whereas you're doing it...
A bit more of a context immersion, overview immersion for just a week or so in each text. Then, say most of the time working back and forth, focusing on themes as that major link between them. And through that, adding in plot and characters.
Yeah, and I think, I think it's really important to emphasize to students as well that it's the skill and that it's, going into maths or going into science, not just an English thing, but the form may be different.
Yeah, and really looking at ways that they can record their thinking, both in the learning and planning stages, but also how they can use, note-taking skills as well to link into their final writing too.
Would you agree with that, Mihi, or any
Yeah.
other things to add?
No, it's been really sort of informative learning about how English teachers use things like color coding or structures to actually help students to do this cognitive lifting.
Yeah.
And for me, that's interesting, and I'm learning a lot about that experience. I guess I'm now walking over the question of like, what does a class where students are successfully doing that cognitive lifting look like? And questions like that. So when I go into classrooms, I'll be...
Well, you're just going to crash my lesson again with your lunch like you did last time. Just awkwardly sit there eating your lunch. And I'm just like, okay. It's all good. All right. Well, thanks for listening. And please, if you have any questions, please post them in the comments below. Or if you don't want your name attached to the comments and to remain anonymous, just send a message and I'll keep that anonymity as well. If you have anything that you'd like to share and add to our conversation, please do so, and I'll catch you later.